Hi, my name is Carol Daisy Soita, and I'm a fourth year student at the Technical University of Mombasa. And today, I'd like to tell you a little bit of a story about myself. Now, for any 20 something year old lady outside there, they understand what it feels like to be somewhere in your early 20s. You know, the beauty that comes with being 21 and 22 and just being at the peak of life itself. So I remember there was one time when, you're in campus and everything is just going so well. Apart from one part, your dating life. And the only thing you want is for everything to be perfect. I'm a perfectionist. It's something that I struggle with every single day. So I remember my friends and I were all about getting someone who is rich and educated and handsome and tall. Not necessarily dark. I mean, we all wanted TDH, but we were still trying to keep our expectations somewhere that we can actually be able to achieve at some point. So we decided that we were going to join a dating site. Now, we started, Googling, and we'd come across things like Tinder and Cupid and Badoo and all whatnot, all those dating sites that you come across on your phone every time you Google. So we picked one out and we joined. And well, I mean, it's not even 24 hours yet and you're already getting in requests. But this is what happened. 2 weeks down the line, this guy gets into my inbox. And at that point, I'm like, you know what? Let me give it a try because it's almost the weekend and you want to party, you want to live life, you want to go to that luxury place. So we have a few conversations and he's like, you know what? Let's move to WhatsApp. And nothing hits better than an epic conversation. For me, that definitely stands out. So we get to move to WhatsApp and, he gives me his full names and at that point, the only thing that gets into my head is that I need to Google this guy. So I go right ahead onto Google and I quickly turn up, I quickly type his name and his LinkedIn pops up, his Instagram pops up, his Facebook. I mean, who looks at Facebook anymore? But I just went right ahead to just check. Maybe he's got a family. He might have a picture of him and kids there. So I just needed to make sure. And then as I scroll down a bit, I come across all these articles and interviews that he actually featured in. And there was one very interesting one. And he had been labeled as one of the most successful bachelors in Kenya. And that's when I knew that I had gone fishing and it was my lucky day because I had just gotten something for dinner. But anyway, so I get back to WhatsApp. I'm still acting like I'm innocent, like I still don't know him. So I'm asking him, what do you do? And we get to know each other and stuff like that. And I realize I have what I want. I have a rich, young, and handsome guy. So when he decides to mention that, hey, let's link up, I'm like, so on Friday I'll be busy, but I can be there on Saturday. Because if I'm not wrong, it was probably around Thursday. So we keep talking, and then, Saturday comes here. And he's like, do I get you an Uber or do I come pick you up? So by this time, I've already told all of my friends, and they're like so excited. So they come over, my cousin comes over, and then I was just like trying to choose. As a woman, you don't even know what to wear because at some point you want to make a good first impression. So you're thinking, what dress do I wear? What shoes do I wear? Do I go for stilettos? Do I go for a wig? Do I go for chunk heels? What what do I wear? So eventually we settle up on something. And you know how we've got these button-up dresses that kind of look like trench coat. They've got this really beautiful design and it was kind of a bodycon in a way, so it kind of makes you look so appealing, and you have them on with some heels, and the moment you walk out of a room with your makeup done and your hair all done, it's like, ooh la la, everybody is mesmerized. So anyway, so he tells me there is this new club at this place and I'd like us to go. So I've never been to that place, but I'm like texting my friends and they're like, oh yeah, we heard about this. You know what? You should go. Just go. Just go. The pressure. And you're like, yeah, I think it's a cool place. So we get to go there, and the moment we get there, it's actually surprising because he says this place is new, But even guys know him. Like, it's almost as though people know him at that place. It's like guys are talking to him and they're trying to, like, make conversation. And it doesn't look like it's new. So anyway, fast forward, we go to VIP. They had like a VIP section upstairs. So we got there, and he asks you like, what do you get? So you're trying to play all classy and bougie and stuff like that. So you order the most expensive bottle of wine you see, because you're like, I don't think money is the issue for him because you've already Googled him. You know what his net worth is. So you're not even scared. So yeah, I get my bottle of wine and we start making conversation. And I think he was doing a whiskey. So the evening goes on, too well, and from time to time, he'd like, place his hand on your thighs, and you think it's normal. He'd hold your hand, he'd move you up a little bit, stand up, he'd dance a bit, he'd sit down. And I think I finished the first bottle, he ordered his food, and then he got me the second bottle. And I've never drunk this much. But I'm not the only one who's having a little bit too many. He's also having a little bit too many, and I can see that it's weighing on him. But then you see, sometimes they say when the deal is too good, you're supposed to think twice. And that's what I didn't do. I never thought twice. The only thing I figured out was I wanted a rich guy, a good looking guy, and someone who's educated. And he fit into the picture, and I figured I had big fish to fry. So there I was. But then, at times, as a woman, when you start getting uncomfortable in a situation that you put yourself into, you start hiding it. So at that point, he's trying to, just like move his hands up all over my body and stuff like that. I know it's a VIP, but we're not the only ones there. So it's getting a little bit uncomfortable. So as I tried to tell him that, hey, let's not do it here, he just doesn't listen. He keeps going and going, and his hands are, all over caressing you. I mean, it's a different thing when he has his hands on your thighs under the table, or his hands on your back that is actually dressed. It's different. But when he's trying to reach out for more, then it's alarming. So at that point, I hold his hand and I tell him, and I'm very uncomfortable with this, and I don't want to keep going forward. And I remember he leaned forward onto my ears and he told me something. He said, baby, don't be such a prick tease. Now, I don't know if you know what a prick tease is, but that is a word that is mostly used to just tell a woman like don't be stubborn. It's mostly used on a woman like when you put a man in a position where you get him all excited and you don't want to go all the way, then he can tell you don't be such a prick tease because you do not want to go all the way. So now at that point, first of all, it gets me mad because why would you tell me such a thing? It's so disrespectful. It is so rude. And then he gets all forceful and he's reaching up onto my button-up dress with all, the little fragile buttons, and he just like pulls it all apart at once. So I'm there, I am in shock because I'm like, my dress is open, I'm in a public place, so far away from home, and I'm half naked in a club, the middle of the night. So I quickly try to fold it up a little bit and I'm like, I'm not comfortable with this. I think I want to leave. So the moment I say I want to leave, that's when he says, so you think you're just gonna spend all my money and go home just like that? And at that point, we have a little bit of an exchange of a conversation and he gets so mad to the point where he stands up and I stand up, I want to leave, and then he stands up, picks up his drink and he pours his whiskey on me. And that's when I realized this is it, you know. And at that point, I think the messages that had actually been coming onto my phone from my friends, because, they're like, send us pictures, we want to know how things are going and stuff like that. I was no longer responding to them, because things have turned upside down. It's like, it's no longer smiles, it's now tears. So I'm at the verge of crying and I'm thinking, I need to get out of here. What do I do? So I pick up my handbag, I go into the front door, I'm clinging onto my dress. And at that time, we didn't have, Uber for only women. So I ask for an Uber, and it's a man, and I'm embarrassed. So first of all, I need to stand outside of the club waiting for this Uber, and men are passing by, and they're probably thinking, she must be a Twilight girl. And you can hear people, whispering and making comments about you. And it's uncomfortable. But eventually, the Uber gets there. And I'm so grateful because that driver was so understanding. So he drives me home. And the moment I get to my place, I find my cousin there. So I probably cried my heart out all the way through the taxi. My eyes are so red. So she looks at me and she knows something is not right. So normally she would ask what's going on. But then, you put yourself in this situation. You barely know how to express yourself. So at that point, I go and lock myself into the bathroom. So I cry and cry and cry until eventually I can no longer cry. So I'm thinking, do I tell my friends? Are they going to understand? Are they going to mock me? Are they going to listen? What do I do? Because you're thinking also you just don't want to, hang on to this pain. So at that point in time, I realized the only thing I can do is to create a space that is safe for me. So I walk back into the room, I pick up a piece of paper and pen, and I realize that the only thing I can do is to pour my emotions. So I decide to write a letter to my future self. And so I tell myself, Dear future Daisy, if you're reading this a few days, weeks, months, or maybe even years from the 23rd of 2021 of February, then it means you have overcome the worst. You have probably been ridiculed and stigmatized and mocked for your decisions by those you chose to trust and cherish. But you've proven to be stronger and you have overcome this. You've probably had sleepless nights of tossing and turning, scared to relieve your worst nightmares, with the only comfort being your pillow soaked in tears. I need you to know that you are brave, strong, and beautiful. You're not broken. You're not defined by one silly mistake or one embarrassing moment. You're a strong woman and a beautiful one at that. You deserve to be happy, to know that it's okay to make mistakes and learn from them. You deserve to be loved. And that's why I love you, Daisy. And from that point, I knew that I can heal, that it was only but a stepping stone in this life. Being abused doesn't define me.
That was an incredible story. I couldn't help but just getting captivated by everything that you said, some very key terms that you brought up that I think we're going to explore as we move on. But even before I get into that, suddenly we've had a new voice coming in, probably wondering who this is. So my name is Melanie. Daisy gave us her full government name, so I think it's only fair that I do the same. I am Melanie Olum. I come from an organization that is called the International Center for Reproductive Health. That's ICRHK for short. So maybe I can just, get into a brief background on who or what ICRH is, what we do. Then maybe we can bring in a bit more sense into what has brought us here today and what we're most likely going to be experiencing for the next few months or so. So ICRHK is an independent local non-government organization established in the year 2000. So the Kenyan office is part of three other offices. We're affiliated to ICRH Belgium and ICRH Mozambique. So ICRH basically works in the field of sexual and reproductive health. Specific to our ICRH mandate is our work that focuses on four areas. So we look at sexual and gender-based violence, HIV, family planning, and adolescent sexual and reproductive health. So as ICRH, we thought, what could we do to really bring out voices such as Daisy and many others and have open, candid conversations around matters violence, but more specific violence that is anchored on gender imbalances. And that is why we're bringing in the concept of gender-based violence. So even just layman's understanding what exactly is gender-based violence, it's not a terminology that we openly use, unless of course you're familiar with it, but basically it's violence that is inflicted on any person based on their gender. And to even bring in an emphasis of how big of an issue it is, we often consider it as a public health concern, a violation of human rights, and a marker of gender inequality. Again, bringing in how big of an issue it is, I could just present some off the hook statistics. So globally, 1 in 3 women experience either physical or sexual violence, mostly from a person that is well known to them. And I use this statement very lightly. I know men who are listening in are probably wondering, it's not only limited to women. Granted, we know this. And again, we're not saying that it is not, we're not saying that men are not victims, or rather, the word we like to use, survivors. But we are saying that women, and I'd like to bring this in again and say women from developing countries, are unfairly affected because of social imbalances. And I bring in the context of developing countries because we're working within the context that we are in now, Mombasa, Kenya, because that's the reality of women on a daily basis. We have, uncalled for comments, uncalled for approaches from persons of the opposite gender, and we often think that it's okay. We often think that it's normal. And those are some of the things that we're trying to deconstruct by having these conversations. So when we approached the Technical University of Mombasa, we thought, what can we do to, again, bring out the voices of survivors, create a new narrative, one that allows us to speak openly, tackle these issues as they are, not to beat about the bush, not to go by the notion of GBV being a taboo, and really seeing what are the social dynamics that affect us and how can we make this a better space for us. And that's why we are working on having a podcast, something that we're going to engage with more as we proceed, that allows us to present a space where our youth, we specifically targeted the youth because it sounds cliche, but we say this all the time, the youth are the drivers of change, the change that we want to see. And that is why we are having this being led by them, being student oriented within the Mombasa context, but hopefully something that can be explored outside as well. So again, ICRH, like many other stakeholders, we understand that youth are instrumental in propelling the change. And we thought that perhaps we could leverage on the opportunities for technology, leverage on the positioning of the Technical University of Mombasa, it being strategically placed, an institution that has the masses, the capacity, and the history in influencing decisions within the county, and really harnessing our efforts together for the change that we want to see in our society. So that's why we're here. That's why we're having these conversations. Daisy mentioned a few things that could be triggers as we progress. She brought in the aspect of being embarrassed. She brought in the aspect of stigma. She brought in the aspect of feeling shame and really seeing that perhaps, had I not made this decision, had I not, perhaps I could have thought a little bit more in-depthly, perhaps I could have uh, rationalized my decision in, hopping onto a stranger's vehicle and accompanying him to wherever he was heading to. And that's what we're calling survivor shaming. Again, something that we're really keen on debunking, even as we're having these conversations. So I think for us as ICRH is to just welcome this opportunity, welcome this intervention. We're looking forward to it. We're going to, it's an interesting dynamic because I'm seated here with Daisy, who is relatively younger than I am.
You know, Melanie, there's something very interesting that you've mentioned. But before we get to that, I'd like to put a disclaimer, to the people listening to us today. And I'd just like to say that although the story I may have narrated earlier on is not mine, it is a story of thousands or maybe even millions of girls outside there. So it needs to be treated with the seriousness that it deserves. And that brings me to, the question that I actually wanted to ask you. You've talked about certain conversations that we are expected to be having in the upcoming weeks. So if you don't mind, could you please tell us a few of what is to be expected?
So some of the conversations that we're looking forward to having are, for example, the consequences of getting into vulnerable situations, changing the lion's mentality. So instead of removing the prey, i.e., instead of avoiding getting into these quote unquote compromising situations, how's about we change the mentality of the lion? How's about we change the mentality of the predator? And make it clear that if it is an unwanted advance, it is exactly that, an unwanted advance. So seeing how we can again move away from the concept of survivor shaming, looking at topics on Fresh in Uni. We have a lot of freshers coming on board soon, I hear, in September, is it?
Yes,
Yeah.
September.
So again, challenges and realities of being a freshman. Manifestations of gender-based violence, how does it look like? Is it only physical? We have aspects of intimate partner violence, for example. So really, again, looking at how GBV is manifested in our context and beyond. Something interesting that I think would be a bit challenging for our men in the house, the art of seduction. Okay, so I know these days it's enough for you to just slide into someone's DMs, yeah, or send a direct message. But traditionally, there are other ways that you could approach a person of the opposite gender. There are other ways in which you can express your interest, ways that at least show that you are understanding, yeah, you are
True.
considerate,
True.
and that no is no, and that
Yes.
no is okay. Yeah.
Precisely.
So looking at the art of seduction, also hopefully having some, I wouldn't say testimonials, but listening into the voices from the afflicted. If possible, if we have survivors that are willing to come on board and share their story, that's
We would love
perfectly
that.
fine. Yeah.
Mhm.
Also looking at emotional abuse as a version of GBV, that it's not just a physical manifestation as well. Something that I know many of us challenge with in silence. Yeah, we struggle
True.
with rather in
Yeah.
silence. Yeah. So also looking at the dangers and the impact of having multiple partners. Yeah. So those are just but a few of the topics, but I think maybe we could explore the option of having our listeners sending in ideas, areas that they think we should consider, topics, sending in proposals to come on board.
Mhm.
I believe we're open to that, Daisy, yeah?
Precisely. And I
Okay,
think
good.
for you, the listener back at home, I'm pretty sure you get to have an idea of what is to come. And I'm pretty sure you know that we've got a pretty beautiful ride ahead of us. So these are just some of the few conversations that we are expected to have in the Missing Link podcast. And as Melanie said, we noticed the gap that existed and decided to create a brave and safe space that will allow you to tell your experiences, listen to conversations and discussions surrounding the norm on gender based violence. And you will be able to join us as we try to connect the dots and discover what it is that is missing. Together, we will tell the stories of our survivors. And like we said, if you are a survivor of gender based violence and you're willing to come forth, then we will be ready to tell your story. And we will be able to hold discussions, deconstructing topics that many are afraid to expound on. So be sure to look forward to our first episode of the Missing Link podcast that will be entertaining, educative, that will also enlighten and offer advice where necessary.
Yay, really looking forward to it, Daisy. I think it's going to be something that can, really be big, really bring in audiences
Yes.
that are keen on listening to what we have to offer.
Mhm.
So I think mine is just to encourage everybody else to tune in. I myself will be an avid listener. And let's just, put together our efforts towards making this a success.
Oh, yes. And if you're at home and you still have many, many questions about this, you can always log on to our social media pages and you can find out more. So for the ICRH, you can always find our many episodes to come on the YouTube page at ICRH Kenya. At Facebook, you can always get them at ICRHK, and on Twitter at ICRHK_official. And for the Tumo website, you can always log on to tum.ac.ke, or you can always tune into tumowebradio.com to listen to our very many episodes. And you can also get onto YouTube at Tumo Radio TV, and you can always listen to so much more over there.